My name is Kevin Drakulik, and I'm part of the marketing team here at Unitrends, and I just have a couple general housekeeping items before we get started today. So first and foremost, everybody on today's call is on listen-only mode, so that means that if you're talking to your phone or your headset, we're not going to be able to hear you on our end, so the best way to get in contact with us is to use the Q&A functionality on the right-hand side of your WebEx. That will go straight to us, and we'll see your questions. We'll also have time set aside at the end of today's presentation to review questions, so we want this to be as interactive as possible. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, go ahead and chat them in, and we'll have time at the end, and we will review all of those questions. We'll also be recording today's webinar and sending it out with a follow-up link, so if there's someone in your organization that was interested but wasn't able to attend, you can at least send them the recording of this webinar, and they can watch it at their own pace. So. Secondly, everyone on today's call has been entered to win a $100 Amazon gift card, so we're going to be selecting 5 winners at the end of today's presentation, which is pretty cool. You get to learn some new things and then hopefully win some money at the end of the event today. So be on the lookout if you're one of the lucky 5 winners. And lastly, go ahead and like us and follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn, all platforms of social media, actually. We constantly do educational type pieces such as this one, and we also have postings of our live events, which can also be found on the unitrends.com/events page as well. So with all those details taken care of, I'm proud to turn it over to Dick Sapler, who's our Senior Product Marketing Manager here at Unitrends, who's going to lead us through today's presentation. So I'll turn it over to you, Dick.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. As Kevin said, I'm Dick Sapler, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Unitrends. I've been with Unitrends for about 3 years now, so becoming an expert in backup and recovery. But prior to joining Unitrends, I was a industry analyst for Aberdeen, an industry analyst firm out in Boston, and I was with Aberdeen for about 4 years and writing about everything in the IT data center. And so I was able to take a lot of the research and all that I learned at Aberdeen and have come over here and applied it, and I'll share the results with you today. So we're going to talk about trends in the cloud, trends in backup, and then how a new form of DRaaS will actually take advantage of those trends and allow you to protect your data and your applications much more efficiently and for much lower cost. So with that, we'll get right into it. And I know that, so for many of you, you may not know who Unitrends is, so just 2 slides introducing us. Here's who we are, 30,000 customers globally. We have 100 petabytes of customer data managed in our clouds. Cloud locations, 3 locations in the U.S., 1 in Canada, UK, Germany, and Australia. And what we're most proud of is that we have a 98% customer satisfaction level, so that our service organization is really solid, and it's a point of emphasis for us. In fact, 2019 Stevie Award winners for service, and that's on top of our 2018 goals and 2017 goals as well. So the next slide, the obligatory logo slide, as I call it, just basically showing you Unitrends customers. The main point here is not necessarily the names inside the boxes, but there are just so many industries that we cover that we're particularly proud of. So with that out of the way, I just wanted to quickly outline what it is we're going to talk about today, the concept of cloud adoption, and how people are doing with the cloud, and then that the highest level of data protection that you can get is called disaster recovery as a service, and why DRaaS has evolved beyond just what is offered today by AWS and Azure. So I just wanted to tell you that, so to basically back up my thesis here, I wanted to share with you a survey and the results that we did from last summer. And this is what I did a lot of when I was at Aberdeen, is basically conducted surveys of IT professionals and then wrote about the trends and best practices that we see in the industry. So through the survey I did in the July timeframe, about 800 respondents, both Unitrends customers and those with no relationship, a nice broad mix of SMB, midsize, and large enterprise, and then I was able to compare the results of 2018 to the surveys that were done in 16 and 17 to get a trend. So let's get right into 5 findings on the state of backup and disaster recovery. And the first is, and I think you'll probably agree that I don't need a survey to prove this, but there's just an exponential growth in data. So the amount of data that has to be protected as part of your data protection and backup and recovery process is becoming onerous. So we had pretty much the same number of respondents, the same type of respondents across the 3 years, but you can see that the percentage of companies that are now wrestling with over a terabyte or 100 terabytes of data that they have to protect is growing quite quickly. And there's no sign this trend won't continue. And if you're using tools that literally 3-4 years old, they really weren't built for the amount of data that we're talking about now. So it may be time to relook at your backup and recovery tools to be able to learn how to scale more appropriately. Number 2. Despite all of the work, the best efforts of practically the entire IT industry, data loss continues at a really high rate. Pretty much unchanged across the 3 years. About 30% of companies reported that they lost data sometime during the year. That's really an astonishing number. And the fact that it's stayed the same is I don't think is a coincidence. I think it's the fact that there are always new threats that are coming. We think that we have malware taken care of, and then suddenly ransomware shows up. You still have malicious employees. You have people who just do sloppy data protection habits, and still about a third of companies are losing data every year. Number 3, and this is good news, disaster recovery testing is increasing in frequency. This was a major finding back in 2016 that literally a majority of the survey respondents reported that they tested their DR plans only once a year or not at all. And that's terrible, because the only way that you will know if you're able to recover during a disaster is to test it in advance. You don't want to have the disaster and then at that time discover that you're missing pieces or the data's not in place and you're unable to recover your business processes. That is improving. It's still not quite acceptable, but still today, at least a full 75% report at least annual DR testing versus just 64% in 2016. I wrote a whole piece around testing, how often you should test, the different types of tests that are out there, and our conclusion was that you should be testing at least monthly or after major changes to your data center. And if you want to read that piece, it's up on our resources section of our website. I highly recommend it, even though I am the author, but it is guiding principles, best practices to test at least monthly. Number 4, also good news. More organizations have secondary recovery sites now. Having only one site doing business in a single location, you need a secondary site both to store your backups as well as to host recovery services. And this very much supports the concept that we'll talk about a little later about using the cloud for DR and recovery. But the good news is that for even small businesses that generally do business only in a single location, they are able to get secondary sites either at a colo, a small rented site, or they use the cloud. And number 5, and this should be no surprise to anybody, the cloud's role in backup is growing. You can see that over the 3 years, the left-hand graph, people using disk and then backing up to the cloud is growing quite substantially over the course of the 3 years. You can also see that the number of people that are using tape is also declining, and that's to be understood. But it's still a surprising number. About 10% of organizations are using tape in one way or another. So the cloud is growing, tape is declining, and disk is maintaining its role in backup. So we set the table now to talking about backup. Now let's talk about the cloud and its rising role in data backup and disaster recovery. So going back to 2016, only about half of the respondents reported that they are using cloud as part of their data backup and protection process. That has grown in just 3 years to almost 60%. So now a majority of people are using the cloud. And that can be that, they just are storing their backups in the cloud, all the way to having full disaster recovery as a service, which we'll talk about a little later. But it's good to see that the cloud is playing more of a role, and companies are choosing to use the cloud as part of their disaster recovery program. Number 7, the resistance to cloud is declining rapidly. If I go back to my Aberdeen days, there were people who were very resistant to using the cloud. The cloud to them was that they were losing control of their data. Someone was going to open it up and read it. They were never going to be able to recover it. There was also just a lot of hysteria about letting the data out of their data center. And much of that has subsided. So when you look at the number of customers, these are the people responding to this question who are not currently using the cloud as part of their backup and recovery process. You can see that the number of organizations has declined rapidly. And when I asked them why not, in 2017, the times of how long it was going to take them to adopt the cloud, they were saying, yes, more than a year. Quite frankly, if it's out a year, it's just wishful thinking. And they're answering that question more to say, yes, we're a cutting-edge company and we will use the cloud. But if you don't have a plan to use it within a year, then really it's just a thought. So today, the majority of people are using the cloud, and those that aren't have a shorter window as to when they will begin using it. And the growing acceptance of the cloud has even formed around non-users. So when I ask non-users to the cloud why you're not, in 2016, most of the responses were around technical issues. Security, data privacy, loss of control were all their reasons for not using the cloud. And so in the last 3 years, obviously, we've not seen a lot of negative cloud stories. We haven't heard about, major data breaches in Amazon or Azure, or major downtimes, or people who put their data in the cloud and were unable to retrieve it. So in the absence of all that bad news, people have begun to realize the cloud is pretty secure. And we should be using the cloud for our data backups. I can assure you from actually having been on site with AWS and Azure that they know more about security than you do. And therefore, your data is probably more secure in the cloud than it is on site with you. So today, the number one resistance to using the cloud is cost. And so hold that thought, and we'll get back to that a little later in the conversation. But most of the technical issues seem to be melting away. Mid-sized companies are the ones that are slowest to adopt the cloud. On the face of it, it sounds like that's pretty surprising, but if you think of SMBs and not having small companies not having a secondary site, the cloud is very convenient for them to host backups, to store backups and host recoveries. And large enterprises are using the cloud primarily for cost savings. It can be cheaper to use a cloud than it is to basically fill out an entire secondary data site. It's the mid-sized companies who are the slowest to adopt the cloud, and quite frankly, I think they'll come on board just like everybody else. And then finally, cloud usage varies greatly by industry. So look for your industry there. Needless to say, it's not surprising that technology is number one. We're eating our own dog food, so to speak. The other category includes, home construction, law firms, not law firms, but a myriad of other smaller industries. But what was surprising to me was that finance and legal were up there, were down there as the laggards. You would think that they would be, they tend to be smaller, they tend to be based in a single location, that they would be cloud adopters, but they also tend to be fairly conservative in their approach. And so I've written several times about how the finance industry really needs to up its game in using the cloud, that it actually improves their security by getting their data up into the cloud. So that's kind of a very quick overview of where we stand with the cloud and DR. And a former competitor of mine, IDG, also shares this, that virtually all organizations now, as of 2018, 96% use the cloud one way or the other. Many of these may be SaaS applications such as Office 365, Salesforce, Google Docs, that sort of thing. But most companies now have some part of their IT infrastructure in the cloud. And in fact, as they say, 81% of enterprises already have a multi-cloud strategy in place. So the cloud is here to stay. It should be. It brings a lot of advantages for backup and recovery. And now I want to shift gears and talk specifically about the highest level of protection that you can get in the cloud, and that's called disaster recovery as a service. And I would like to introduce the concept of Unitrends Cloud. So the cloud, as I said, has been around for quite some time, literally about 10 years. It's really seen its heyday in the last 6 or 7 years, but it's been in existence for about 10 years. And the analogy I like to use is that in 1954, my father drove cross-country in a brand new Mercury. But along the way, he had to have 4 oil changes and 2 tune-ups, because that's the state of automobiles in 1954. Now, obviously, you can drive across the country 3 or 4 times. You don't even have to have the oil changed. So technology evolves. Technology gets better. It gets easier to use. It gets more reliable. And that's exactly what's happened with the cloud. So when you start thinking of cloud, don't think only of what Azure and AWS offer. There are variations on the theme and alternatives out there. And one of them is Unitrends Cloud. It is purpose-built cloud for storing backups and for disaster recovery as a service. And we offer DRaaS for all of the major variants of virtualized VMware, Hyper-V. We also do it for physical Windows. And we have some very compelling differences that we'll talk about as to why our version of DRaaS is superior to that provided by AWS or Azure. So before I do that, let me get a little technical on you here and describe exactly how our version of DRaaS works. So you have up in the upper left-hand corner there on your screen the customer's on-premise data center. And the users are all there using their business applications. And also on premise, they have a Unitrends Recovery Series appliance. And that is taking backups of their database and replicating them down into the Unitrends cloud, or up into the cloud, to a copy of our Unitrends backup software as a target. Our Unitrends backup software is a software version of our hardware appliance. And so you'd be very familiar with it if you are a Unitrends customer, exactly what it does. So we are replicating the data into the cloud as part of every backup. So your latest data is already there if there's a disaster. Okay, now something happens on site and the applications go down, the users lose their state, they lose access to their applications, and so at that point, the IT people on premise literally call us on the phone and declare a disaster. And so what we do at that point is we take their backups and we literally start an instant recovery from the copy of Unitrends backup that's been housing their data onto our cloud stack and to dedicated servers and storage devices that are just sitting there waiting to be used in the time of emergency. So those instant recovery jobs literally are what they are, and that is instant recovery. They come up, whether they're VM or Hyper-V, physical Windows servers, whatever they are, and then what we do is we literally issue an SSL VPN to the customers and redirect the users of our customer so that they begin and start to use their business applications in our cloud. We'll talk about recovery times in just a bit, but because they can vary depending on the priority of the applications you want recovered. So immediately, while the customers are beginning to use their business applications, we begin to record all the changes of the data and creating literally backup jobs of the cloud applications so that we have a backup target for cloud data changes. So we are recording the data changes. So you now, as a customer, your business users are happy, they're using their applications, and now you have some time to reestablish your on-premise data center. You can run in our cloud for up to 30 days at no extra charge, giving you plenty of time. I mean, if you have a total wipeout of your data center, you have to order brand new servers and storage devices and so forth, you have that time, the luxury of time, because you can run for up to 30 days at no additional charge. So now we have a secondary backup with just the changes made to your database. So the on-premise data center is restored, and what we do is we literally, if it's been a lot of changes to the data, and if it's a total wipeout of the data center, we will actually take one of our Unitrends Recovery Series appliances, and we will load your data onto that recovery appliance and then overnight it to you in your new data center. This keeps us from having to take weeks and weeks of WAN time and capacity to replicate over the network. We can literally replicate your data and get it to you within 24 hours. Then at that point, the little bit of data that's left that's changed in the cloud, we get that on the appliance, or at the very end we can sync that over the WAN just because the volume of data is so slow, and then everything is back in your data center, and now you're operating as you were before. So this is a different style of DRaaS. What you'll notice in this is that not once did I say that the customer has to do anything other than call us. This is entirely on us. We put the service in disaster recovery as a service. So let me go into that into greater detail. Okay? So, so our advantage, the advantages of our approach to DRaaS built in the Unitrends cloud is there are 5 major advantages. So let me go through them one by one. Service level agreements. Because we are doing the work, we are able to guarantee our performance with what's called a service level agreement. Basically, it's a guarantee that we will recover your applications in the cloud in the time periods that we said we would. So at the very bottom there, you see our premium SLA. We guarantee your business applications will be up and running in 1 hour. So what we do with you in advance is we actually work to try to triage your applications, and we identify those that are most critical to you and your business operations. And we recommend that those then have a premium SLA attached to them. You get full onboarding testing with all the premium machines. You literally get weekly recovery testing that you don't have to do that. We will test it and send you the results. And then the max machine size, 24 virtual CPUs and 256 a gig, that's a big VM. That's a class of VM where you can run Oracle databases and Exchange servers and applications such as that. So the premium offering is a 1 hour SLA. Then for applications that are important but not critical, we would recommend that you cover them with an elite service level agreement. And elite says we'll have them up within 24 hours. We'll onboard up to 10 elite machines. We do monthly testing, and we still have a pretty large VM that can cover those applications. So it doesn't mean it's going to take 24 hours to bring up your applications. We have brought up thousands of applications for our customers. I think the longest we've taken is 18 minutes. That was a fairly complex application. I think it had 5 servers in it. And so the reason we offer the difference between a 1 hour and 24 hour is so that we can concentrate on truly the critical servers if there was a major event such as a hurricane coming up the East Coast, where literally dozens and dozens of our customers were going down and needed our services. So it allows us then to segregate between critical and important. And then finally, there's a bulk SLA. While we make no claim for how fast we'll get them up, we'll bring up all of your other applications in our environment. There's no testing. There's smaller machine sizes, but we'll bring up those applications that you still need in order to operate efficiently, but they're not a priority, and therefore they're on a best effort basis. So service level agreements, guarantees on recovery time, you won't get that from any other cloud provider because you have to do the work with AWS and Azure. If you're attending this webcast, you probably attended those by Amazon and by Microsoft, and their demo of their DRaaS, literally they're probably showing you 17 different screens that you need to get into in order to manage the DRaaS process, when they don't address the issue that if you're in a disaster, you probably have no internet access, and therefore you can't even begin the process. With us, pick up your cell phone, call us, and we do the rest. Okay, our DRaaS is also built around services. We work with you in advance to set up the process. We make a jointly plan out with you exactly which applications need to come up, what's the boot order that they need to be, where are all the users located. We network settings in advance, and then we keep setting it up and testing it until it performs the way you want it to do. And we'll continue managing and monitoring your applications to ensure that they will come up in the event of a disaster. So if you don't want to become an expert in cloud compute cycles and storage versions and so forth, this is the way you should go. Also, if your IT resources are completely full up, they haven't got spare cycles for learning about cloud storage, then this is an easy thing to do as well, because all of the work falls on us. Number three, as I intimated before, we do scheduled automated recovery testing. So while there is no disaster, what we do is on regularly set schedules, we'll roll your applications from the recovery stack onto our recovery stack and bring those applications up and test them to make sure they're fully functional. We have 50 pre-canned tests that we do against applications. For example, if we bring up a database, we will actually go in and add an element to a database and then delete it just to ensure that the database is actually performing. So, and then at the end of that, we will send you an actual report that shows you that we not only have tested, but that the testing, it was successful, and the actual RPO and RTO times for that test. This is an exact copy of what that report looks like, and this report is so good that for those of you in the healthcare industry who are living under HIPAA mandates, if you have a HIPAA audit, you can show them this report, and you can get then acceptance that not only do you have a DRaaS program, but that it's tested and that it's performing within the mandated times. This report is that good. So you'll get this automatically, no extra effort on your part. Again, weekly for premium, every month for elite, and for recovery. And also we'll do on-demand tests. If you make a major change to your infrastructure, you start adding servers or remove servers or add applications, we will do testing to make sure that those are part of your DRaaS suite. And finally, costs. For those of you who have any experience with cloud computing, you know it's not only complex, but there are charges for everything. There are different charges depending on different levels of storage. There are charges to take your data and move it out of storage into onto compute servers. There are charges if you want to recover your data out of the cloud back down to your on-premise location. Compute cycles, you pay for every second that you're using one of their servers. If you have an extended period of downtime on your on-premise, obviously you're going to pay a tremendous amount for the compute times that you're running as opposed to Unitrends Cloud where you can run for 30 days for free. So for budgeting purposes, with Unitrends, you can know exactly how much you're going to pay for DRaaS. With using public cloud, you have no idea how many downtime events you're going to have over the course of a year, and therefore you have no idea how much money to budget for disaster recovery. So we went in and we configured up several different scenarios for the amount of storage to be that you require, how many years you're talking about, how many downtime events you have, how much data you need to retrieve after each downtime event. And you can see here that the wide variability in the pricing. And so we're so sure about this that what we have done is we have actually built on our website a cloud cost calculator. You can go in and you can set the number of years of retention for your backups, the amount of data you want to be able to protect, the number of recoveries you think you're going to have in a year, the amount of data that you're going to need to recover out of the cloud, and you can see for yourself exactly how much we cost versus how much it likely costs you from Amazon and Azure. We're that sure that we're the deal. So take advantage of that. And so, but further, to remove some of the cost out of disaster recovery, we're running a promotion in Q1. For customers who purchase disaster recovery as a service, if you buy 3 years of the service, you will only pay for 2. So it's equivalent of about a 33% savings. This includes all levels of DRaaS and all retention periods, and it applies across the entire cloud purchase. So there are no limitations, there's no gotchas in here. Whatever the bill is for the disaster recovery service, you will only pay for 2 years of it. And for those who don't want full DRaaS but still want to use the cloud for storing their backups and long-term retention, if you buy 3 years of Forever Cloud, you will get 6 of those months for free. And that's all volumes. You can have 500 gigs to to terabytes. You can also keep retention periods as short as 90 days or up to infinity. And this is good for new and existing customers as well. So we're really addressing the cost piece, that thing that we found in the survey, the data element, that the last point of resistance for people who are resisting using the cloud for cost purposes. So each of these are major savings. We really want you to use the cloud. It is very reliable. We've never lost a bit of data for a customer, and this is something you need to be taking care of to protect your data. So with that, I'm going to turn this back over to Kevin for the Q&A session of our presentation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dick. And just for everybody on the line, if you are interested in talking to a product specialist or maybe even talking to your account manager if you are a current customer today, go ahead and chat in the Q&A section, and we'll be sure to follow up with you in a one-on-one call after this webinar today. That way we can review your environment and see what's kind of the best fit for you. All right, we got a couple questions here, and feel free to chat in any questions that you may have. Just going to go through some of these. Jeffrey has a question here. It says, as an education participant, we use mostly Google for education and Amazon Web Services. How can DRaaS be implemented in that environment? Okay,
so we have literally thousands and thousands of educational customers, and what we're finding is that for students, the university provides Google Drive, Google Docs. And Unitrends is a member of the Kaseya family and offers Google Doc backup services from Spanning Tree. And so you would protect them through a Spanning product. We also find that educations generally provide administrators and university employees with Office 365. So you can also get protection through Unitrends for the Office 365 portion. This DRaaS would be very good for the applications that the university then uses to manage itself. So things like student registration process, your web pages, administration of budgets and administration applications, things like that. So the data that you use in order to run your university or secondary school would be ideal for our disaster recovery as a service operations.
Awesome. Great question. Another question here from Lewis. Looks like he was looking for some clarification around the Linux support here. So it says, does it back up and support Linux? And then what about HPUX?
Yes. So our cloud is certified for any of the applications, operating systems, or hypervisors that are listed on our compatibility and interoperability matrix. There are about 350 of those listed. All sorts of versions of Windows. Linux is definitely on it. In fact, there's Ubuntu and other versions of Linux that are covered. I encourage you to go on our website. It's up there. You can look it up yourself. But whatever is on that compatibility matrix is protected through our DRaaS process.
All right. Question here from Trey is, do you have a breakdown to why Amazon and Microsoft charge so much? Is there kind of any insight there?
Basically, they nickel and dime you for every service and everything that you do. That's the way they make their money. And so you pay for storage, you pay for getting data into storage, you pay for getting data out of storage, you pay for compute cycles, different levels of compute cycles, different types of computes. So we have come at it from an entirely different approach, which is a service. You pay for the service, and you get us and all of our capabilities. So we encourage you to investigate because we know that once you get into this, you'll really see how the charges start to add up over time.
Awesome, good question. Another follow-up question from Lewis says, what is your estimated SLA time in that DR scenario? So I'm assuming kind of the hurricane instance, kind of the natural disaster. So I know that this one will vary just based on environment, but I'll let you kind of answer that.
Yeah, so it depends on the SLA that you put on top of the applications that you're protecting. As I said, the little story, a little vignette about the longest we've taken to recover an application is 18 minutes. And that was a very complex one. But that's because we already have your data sitting in a warm state within the recovery site. We don't do cold storage. Everything is warm. The data is literally concurrent with the recovery appliances. So, even though we talk about Elite being 24 hours, it won't be 24 hours. It'll be after we're done with all the premium SLAs. And then the bulks. So we'll put this in writing for you too, so that our SLAs are written guarantees with payouts if we don't hit it.
Great. All right. It looks like a lot of questions are kind of slowly trickling in here, but it looks like a lot of people just want to follow up and have a one-on-one conversation about their environment. So with that, I think we're going to kind of wrap up here. I will leave the bridge open just for about 5 more minutes here, just so everyone, if you do have any additional questions here, you can go ahead and chat them in, and we can take it offline with you and kind of go into a little bit more detail there. So feel free to chat in any additional questions you may have. Again, we did record this session, so we'll be sending it out once we wrap up here, so be on the lookout for that email within the next 24 hours or so once we get the recording pulled off of WebEx here. Again, we're going to be selecting 5 winners to win a $100 Amazon gift card, so maybe you'll be the lucky winner today. And with that, again, go ahead and follow us and like us on LinkedIn and Facebook. Head over to the Unitrends events page, see if we're coming to your city within the near future here. And also with that, we're just going to wrap up and give you guys 20 minutes back of your day. So thank you, Dick, for your time. Very much appreciated, and everyone have a good rest of your week. Thank you.
Thank you.